Today we're talking about knowing your rights in general, knowing your rights with ICE, talking a little bit about what's going on with ICE right now. I know that a lot of things have been in the news. Wes and I actually just recently went to a training that was about knowing your rights. It was a different organization. It was Hands Off New York, which is actually where I'm wearing the button from, but very similar information to what we're sharing with you today. I've used selected slides here. You can see the whole slide presentation on that website. First, these come from the New York Immigration Coalition. All of these Know Your Rights materials that I'm going to share with you, they are a statewide member-led coalition of immigrant and refugee organizations. If you go to any sort of abolish ICE protest, anything that is having to do with immigrants' rights, you will definitely see them there represented. You'll see their signs and their logo all over the place. So their major goals are to strengthen and build member power among immigrant communities, to organize and educate communities and the public, and to use our collective voice to advocate for opportunity and justice. So you'll see all of those values reflected in those slides. And of course, they are values that SMART shares as well. It should be clear by now that I am not a lawyer. I'm also not an expert on things related to immigration. This isn't legal advice. There are people that you can contact at the New York Immigration Coalition if you do need legal advice about anything, but just know that clearly I can't answer those questions. So what is currently happening? I know we've seen ICE in the news a lot. It's really hard to watch the videos of the things that they've been doing, especially in Minneapolis. I think we've been flooded on social media. So let's talk a little bit about concretely what's happening right now. Under President Trump, DHS has expanded immigration surveillance, enforcement, and detention and deportation. Surveillance, it means the government is using new methods to track and monitor immigrants. Enforcement, there are more ICE and CBP immigration raids. They're targeting a much larger group of people, which we'll talk about in a second. And there's more immigrants who are being held in detention centers and being deported. All of this is under the current Trump administration. So with that has come expanded funding for immigration enforcement. So this poorly named beautiful bill, it added $170 billion for anti-immigration enforcement, detention, and deportation. That's why we see this sort of ramping up of that even more, is because there's more money. And currently, Democrats are working to combat additional funding that would be added to their budget, and also to pull some of the funding back from that as well. We will see where that goes. That is in the process right now. But one of the reasons that we see so much more of ICE is because as of this year, they have a much, much bigger budget. That gives them the ability to hire more agents, buy new equipment, just do more of what they're doing. And that's what we've seen in these cities, especially Minneapolis. Some of the things that have changed is this idea of enforcement priorities. So who does ICE, who does Customs and Border Patrol focus on arresting? And in the past, it's basically been people that they deemed as a threat, a violent threat, or that they had some sort of otherwise crime that they were thought to have committed, that they were identified by how threatening they were. Right now, it's just opening it up to anyone who's undocumented. So it used to be that if you were just undocumented and you were here living your life, the chances are that you would be targeted by ICE or CBP were pretty low. That has changed with the Trump administration. Trump canceled those kinds of priorities that were set by Biden of going and looking for people who were actively committing crimes. And Trump has said, go look for anybody who is undocumented. That's another reason why we see that things are ramped up and different than they once were. This is the actual language, a threat to national security, border security, or public safety. And again, there's ways of parsing that probably don't work in everyone's favor, but the language here that has been really expanded to say that anybody who is undocumented is subject to that kind of investigation and arrest. Another change is that before there was protection of what was called sensitive locations, so schools, hospitals, places of worship, public gatherings. The immigration agents were told not to conduct enforcement in these places. Now Trump has canceled that policy. So agents still need a valid warrant to enter private spaces, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But this idea of having these protected, safe places where immigration enforcement doesn't come, like a school or a church, those have been taken away. So the thing that we've seen a lot of, and these slides were from December. So again, I keep saying Minneapolis because that's the current target right now. That's the one we've seen so much about in the past several weeks. But the strategy is to target these cities. So we've seen LA, we've seen DC, Chicago, Portland, Oregon. And the justification for this is that there's crime in cities and that somehow doing this will bring crime down. That has not in any way been shown to be the case. And many state and local officials have challenged these moves in court. Court. One of the things we've seen in New York City is we've seen ICE in outer boroughs and then also in the federal immigration court downtown. That's what they're doing right now. New York City and New York State both have laws that say that federal agents cannot do enforcement in city or state courts. But since immigration court is federal, they've been there. So that's how they're targeting people in New York right now. But all of this is very fluid and can change. So given all that, I think it's really important for us to remember that we have rights and we have strength, and that as communities, people are pushing back against ICE and against Trump, and it's working. So let's talk about some of that. You have rights, whether you are documented or undocumented. If you are here in the US, you have these rights no matter what, right? Every person in the US, regardless of immigration status, has these rights. You always have the right to remain silent and not answer questions. You can always say, I don't want to answer your questions. You can refuse searches of your body, your home, and your belongings. Without a warrant, you can say, I do not consent to you searching me. I do not consent to you searching my car. I do not consent to you searching my apartment. And that is a right that you have to date. You also cannot be arrested or detained for no reason. There has to be an explanation to you of why you are being arrested or detained. If you ask someone, am I free to go? They have to tell you, yes, you're free to go if there's not a reason for you to be detained. So all of these are rights that you have, again, no matter what your immigration status is. If you are here, you have these rights. Saying the same thing again, but these are constitutional rights. We all have them, no matter what law enforcement we are interacting with. It doesn't matter that it's federal law enforcement, that it's ICE, even the FBI, any level of law enforcement, we have these rights. And it's really important that we defend these rights, because if we lose them, or if a group of people loses them, then we're all at risk of losing them. So it's really important that we all, whether you're documented or undocumented, whether you're a person with a lot of privilege or a person with less privilege, like the people with privilege definitely need to be saying, these are our rights. We're standing up for them, because it's people without privilege who are going to get them taken away first. How you assert your rights. You have the right to always remain silent or not answer questions. So if you are asked on the street, are you a US citizen? You can say, I don't want to answer that question. I could say that. Anyone could say that. It's not something that you have to answer. You can just say, I do not want to answer that question. And that is asserting your right and saying, I'm exercising this right by not answering your question. You also have a right to refuse searches. So if someone says, can I take a look at what's in your bag or your pockets or your car? You say, no, I do not consent to a search. It's not a good practice to physically resist a search. So in many of these cases, what we're saying is you assert your right. And in the ideal world, your assertion of your right is what makes people respect your right. Like you say, I don't want you to search my bag. The way it should work is by you saying that, no one searches your bag. If someone then does search your bag, it's not that you physically resist it. What you then have is a very clear case of somebody stepping over your rights. But it's so important that we enforce those rights, that we have them, even if somebody is going to step over them, even if somebody's going to violate those rights. We need to be like, you know what? I know that I have them. And later on, when there's a court case, when there's an investigation into this, it can be very clearly said, you know what? I said no, and they did it anyway. So this is working in your favor of, I was well aware of my rights. I said what they were, and I was not listened to. But physically resisting puts you in further danger. We don't want to advise you to do that. You also have the right to know if you're being detained or arrested. If an ICE agent stops you and is asking you questions and you're saying, I don't want to answer your questions, and they seem to be like keeping you there nonetheless, you get to ask, am I free to go? Or why am I being detained? And if you ask if I'm free to go and they say yes, then you can walk away. You're done. If you say, why am I being detained? And they don't have a solid answer, you should also be able to walk away. Of course, you're evaluating your own safety in these situations, but it is your right in those moments to walk away. The other thing, if you are an observer or if something is happening with you and you are documenting an ICE officer or any law enforcement, you have the right to do that. You have a right to take pictures. You have a right to take video. But if you're documenting an ICE interaction or a law enforcement interaction from outside, you might be asked to step back. You can't interfere with what they're doing, which can be translated in all sorts of different ways. But if you're literally filming it and not standing in the way of an officer, then that is legally protected. They might tell you to put your phone away, and you can say, I have the right to record. I have the right to take pictures. I have a right to document it. But again, don't interfere with officers. That puts you in a not good position. You also have the right to inform others of their rights. So if someone is being detained by ICE and they're asking that person questions, you can say to that person, you have the right not to speak. You can tell people their rights as if they're being detained. You can say, you have the right to not speak. You have the right to not open the door. All of those things. You can tell someone that in the moment. If someone says you can't talk to them, you say, I have the right to inform others of their rights. And again, don't interfere with officers. You might have seen some of these Know Your Rights cards in other forms. This is the New York Immigration Coalition's version of this. I like this one because I think it covers a lot of ground, and it's available on their website in, I don't even know how many languages. That's certainly not all of them. It's definitely on there in Chinese. It's definitely on there in Spanish. So it just gives you like a reference card of what are my rights. If you get nervous in situations with law enforcement, which I certainly do, you can pull it out of your pocket and say, oh yes, like this is the thing that I want to say. I have the right to remain silent. I'm just going to go over them again. You can say, I do not wish to speak with you or answer your questions. Goes with the first one. I do not give you permission to enter my home without a warrant signed by a judge. So that's searches and seizures. We'll talk about what that warrant looks like next time. You can say, I don't consent to searches of my person, my belongings, my vehicle, my home, any of that. If I'm detained, I want to contact my attorney immediately. This is one that wasn't on there, but it's an important one. I refuse to sign anything without advice from an attorney, so don't sign anything either. These are all available on the New York Immigration Coalition's website. Also, if you want to see the whole thing, again, in a variety of languages, along with lots of things you can print out, lots of things you can share with community members, they encourage you to use these slides in the way that we're using them now to share this information with your communities, your family, your friends, so you can do this same thing of just talking people through this so that they know what their rights are. And you can choose from what slides they have, what would be most pertinent to the people that you're talking to. We're going with the ones that I thought would be most pertinent to us. So what can you do? What can I do in a larger sense? You can assert your rights, but what else can you do? If you see immigration enforcement, you can verify if they're actually immigration agents. NYPD is going to look different than immigration. Make sure you're seeing what their badges say. They will likely say police, but they will also say DHS, Customs and Border Patrol, various federal agencies, as opposed to the NYPD badge that you see. You can look around and see if there's other law enforcement present. You want to pay attention to clothing, vehicles, any words or like symbols on them, because that's going to give you an indication of what department they are with. And another thing, this came up in our training, there's an organization, DHS, in the city that's the Department of Homeless Services. People have confused that DHS for the Department of Homeland Security. So if you see a New York City van that says DHS on it, double check, because those are homeless services. It's really confusing, but that has been one of the sort of very easily made mistakes of which DHS are we talking about. And document if you feel safe. And again, you're always evaluating your own safety level, and that's very personal. That comes from yourself and nowhere else. But if you do feel safe, you can take videos or photos of what's happening. A lot of what we have seen on the news, a lot of what we know about what kind of things are happening during immigration enforcement actions are from people documenting. We wouldn't know about these things without the video, without the pictures. It's really important, not only our knowledge of what's going on, but also justice in the future. So focus on what's happening, take pictures, take video if you feel comfortable doing so. If you don't feel comfortable doing so, you can still document what's happening by observing and then writing down the details of what you've seen. And I want to encourage you, if you're interested, to check out that New York Immigration Coalition Library of Know Your Rights resources. There's a lot of very specific resources for specific populations. So if you're someone who currently is an immigrant and is currently within the process of obtaining different statuses, they can tell you what to do. They can give you support in that as well. There's a lot of information there. There's a lot of ways of supporting people. You can get involved in community organizations that are helping to get food to people, helping to patrol neighborhoods to see if they see ICE. You can put up flyers in your building. You can tell people about their rights. You can give out those rights cards. There's a lot of ways. With this kind of knowledge, you have the power to at least a little bit better differentiate who's ICE, who's a community member who is like involved in this network of support. So I think it's really important to continue trying to be knowledgeable about this so that we can identify ICE when and if we see them. And we can identify the community members, our neighbors, people at SMART that are all here trying to protect immigrants in our community. So I would encourage you to find the people that you can trust and to really lean on the people that you can trust right now in terms of saying that we are banding banding together to defend our community and to defend people who have been marginalized within our community and targeted in our community as immigrants, who are very much as much members of the community as anyone is. So that is my thought on that. When people band together, when people push back, when people build community and really stand on the values that we share of immigrants are our neighbors, immigrants are our community, this is wrong to target them in this way, then that has a huge amount of power. And we're seeing that happen already. Again, I am absolutely in no way an expert on this. I am only pulling information from other sources in the community that I trust with this information. So I'm just carrying this information farther as much as I can.